So yesterday I had posted a little video um, that was of a popular person speaking, and I'm trying to avoid mentioning the person's name because the issue is bigger than them, right? I don't want what I said to be understood as a personal axe to grind with that particular person because it's not about personalities. It's not about any of that stuff, right? So really, it's not that that person happens to be a popular speaker is in some ways, if not irrelevant, certainly less important. So it doesn't matter. I mean, you can see who's speaking in the video, right? But this is not a personal attack, right? So I mean, more importantly, I want this to be understood. This is not me doing a personal attack. It's a critique of what I personally feel is the encroaching secularization of the Muslim mind, in particular the American Muslim mind. And of course, I only showed like a very short segment. I mean, there's more video, and there's plenty of people that were there that can attest to essentially what was the message, right? That we there's no such thing as a perfect candidate, and therefore if we happen to disagree with a person on one or two points, but we agree with him on a whole bunch of others. Look, you know, the whole point of me making the video was that one, it wasn't that, or rather to maybe better make my point. At the end of this pitch, the person then basically is saying that this person that we have in office now, right, Donald Trump, is a fascist and this or that. I don't know, maybe he is. I mean, full disclosure, I did not vote for Trump, and I will not vote for Trump. I think he's a moral avalanche. He's an absolute moral catastrophe, right? And because I tend to be more of a moralist, right? I just can't bring myself to vote for him on moral grounds. Now, I'm not telling you to vote, not to vote, any of that stuff, right? I know that there's certain groups, some Salafi groups in particular, can have a sort of quietist bent where you just don't kind of get involved in politics. That's not what I'm even advocating here. If you want to vote, vote. If you don't want to vote, fine. My issue was one, pitching this person in office as some kind of antichrist figure, as they're so horrifically bad compared to the other people that his predecessors, right? I mean, if you compare Obama and Bush and whatnot, I mean, certainly on the warmonger tip, you can say whatever you want. He doesn't seem to be a warmonger yet, and hopefully he doesn't exacerbate any wars. In fact, his either sacking or whatever happened with John Bolton, I don't know. That's kind of positive because that dude is definitely a warmonger, and that dude is definitely crazy. My issues had more to do with the power of suggestion that we should compartmentalize our creedal and moral issues, all for the Faustian bargain, all for the hope of some bargain that if we vote for a candidate, we're going to get all of these things. And here's where I really come in, where I actually bring some experience and you could say reflection, not purely from a religious point of view, because we're talking politics, but actually from the perspective of an African American, right? For I don't know how many years, black folks we have been given this promise that if we vote, we're going to get all these things, right? And that when you look at what is happening in black America, predominantly, I'm not talking about, yes, there is white supremacy, there is white privilege, there is institutional racism, undoubtedly, and we should deal with those things, right? I am not going to go to the extreme side of it either that says those things don't exist. That would be preposterous. But when you look at the bulk of what is sandbagging black people today, economically, socially, culturally, right? We also have to look at the culture that we have created and the culture that we participate in. And it is my firm belief that the major thing that is hamstringing Black America today is an issue of morality and self-worth. The issue of morality, self-worth, and self-determination, of which none of those can be cultivated by voting. Now, again, I am not saying don't vote. If you want to vote, vote. I'm not of the camp voting is haram, it is this, it is that. That isn't that. People were speculating, so that's why I'm explaining myself. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. All I'm saying is, and this is the message that's given to us, right? If we don't vote, what's going to happen? Trump is going to all throw us in a concentration camp. You know, and look, I mean, obviously the guy is, I mean, he's just, wow. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic about him. Again, the guys are just a total avalanche. It's a total clown show. But to instill within American Muslims this boogeyman sense, this Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Nightmare on Elm Street kind of thing of like, we have to vote for people that not only we might have a disagreement with, but are actually in the very opposite of major theological and creedal issues. And then how that could actually have some creep, right? We talk about creeping Sharia. I think it's actually more creeping secularism. Well, first we begin, okay, fine. You know what? The Quran is blatant, one, about homosexual acts. But then we walk it back another step. Well, okay, lakum dinakum waliyadin. You have your way and have mine. I disagree with your lifestyle, LGBTQ, whatever. I disagree. Now it's to the point where, well, what else? Maybe, and forget about the easy, low-hanging fruit of homosexuality. I mean, in some ways, I'm so tired of having to talk about it. But what about things like, incessant war overseas, or even domestically, some other issues that are going on, riba, like usury. I mean, we could just go into a whole cadre of everything where we walk it back. Well, to the next thing you know, which is kind of what, Charles Taylor talks about and others. It's like eventually religion comes to be either completely domesticated by the state, which is the case of modern Christianity. That's why you can have a person like Trump that can run for president under the guise of being a Christian, and yet he openly fraternizes with porn stars, right? That is what happens when either you make so many moves and accommodations that your religious tradition, which means you, not just your religion, but then you yourself ultimately become domesticated by power, because it's what you become seduced by, either to pursue it yourself, perhaps that's Trump's thing, or you look to power to solve all of your problems yourself, which is most certainly what has been kind of fed, I personally feel, well, kind of to American society to some degree in general, right? But most certainly with black folks. And when you look to some of the early black thinkers that were coming out of slavery into Reconstruction, going into Jim Crow, even coming out of it, like, what is one of the little rhymes, or what are one of the words that we kind of hear that's kicked around but doesn't get talked a lot about, right? Was what? Self-determination, which in itself was almost like a euphemism for being very, very skeptical about state power, about essentially turning everything over to the state to determine how do we live a good life, right? And therefore, that's what I'm most concerned to hear in this kind of rhetoric. We have to vote because of da-da-da-da-da, right? And I always use as one good other social marker. I have found the Asian American community has really been an interesting model, particularly Chinese, Korean, um, is that by and large, they don't seem to be certainly overly concerned about politics. I mean, they vote or whatnot, right? But they have been able to maintain a sense of identity, culture, uh, higher standard of living, quality of life. I mean, their children get educated, they go to good schools, they make the best of good opportunities, they pursue jobs that, just in other words, the Asian American community has shown you don't have to get neck deep in bed with politics in order to be able to live a good life, in order to be able to have some sense of self determination. I'm sure many Asian Americans vote, so I don't think that's the issue, but not this promise of if we don't vote that, somehow we're turning everything over to other people. Um, and of course, the irony is that this person is saying, well, maybe you disagree with the bulk of their issue, disagree with a few things, but you agree with the bulk. I mean, the irony is, I know, and it's funny now, it's become like a shame issue, but I know many Muslims actually would vote for Trump because they have these major issues with some of the other candidates, not only on the LGBTQ issue, but on several other issues. And they're like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I disagree with him on these moral issues, but I kind of agree with him on the bulk of these other things. What's ironic is that the message that's being given here could also be played the other way. So I just wanted to explain a little bit what I meant. I don't have any personal axe to grind with this individual. I have an axe to grind with the ideology, with the philosophy, and with the consequences of that I see of this creeping secularism in our community, because ultimately it just undermines. I mean, I see people that their faith gets eroded, and it's that they're not even happy being unfaithful. They're not even happy. They're like either they've gone into almost left Islam, but they don't even genuinely seem to be happy then, right? I do believe that faith is an important part of living a happy, good life. And part of that is you got to determine your own way of how you're going to be in the world. Undoubtedly, we will have to negotiate part of our existence here. So we may vote on this or that. I always say don't go for the head fake of the presidential vote because there's so much hype. I mean, one, it's making people millions of dollars, whether it's the candidates, but certainly the media, right? I mean, it draws people to newspapers, to websites, to CNN, to this or that, right? So it gets everybody hyped up, but it's like the president is not an emperor. I'm not saying the president is inconsequential, but the president is not a king, a monarch. He's not an emperor. If you really wanted to if you really wanted to get involved with what's going on in your lives, I would say, get more actively involved in local politics. I don't know, your school board, what's going on in your city, other things, if that's what you really, really want. And don't always go for the head fake of the hype of the every 4 year presidential thing. So I wanted to make my point clear. I don't have any personal axe to grind. That's why I have continued to not mention this person's name, because it's not them that's important. It is the ideology. I did mention mass and I did mention care because I personally find it somewhat deplorable and really disappointing that they don't have the wherewithal to see what they're advocating for and its negative consequences. And I would urge them to reconsider putting people like this as keynote speakers that definitely do shape the thoughts and the minds of Muslims, especially young Muslims. And I don't think they're thinking it all the way through to the end like a chess game. So anyway, inshallah, I hope that this can be understood a little bit better where I was coming from. I'm not interested in personal attacks. I really want to see our community repair and redevelop a very strong sense of self determination, and undoubtedly that will actually be good for everybody else around us, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. So, inshallah, see you at the next controversy. Assalamu alaikum.